All right, Matt, can we do another mic check, please?
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Well.
You copy?
Matt, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Sure can, thank you.
You bet.
Good evening and welcome to the August 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Shawnee City Council. I am Mayor Michelle Disler. I'll be chairing this meeting. I'll do a roll call at this time. Councilmember Thomas. Present. Councilmember Zimmerman.
Yep, present.
Councilmember Jenkins.
Present.
Councilmember Kimling.
Present.
Councilmember Larson-Bonnell. Present. Councilmember Knappen.
Present.
Councilmember Constance. Present. Councilmember Chafee. Present. Thank you. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. And I would like to dedicate tonight's moment of silence to a few very important people. First off, Angie Lawrence, a member of our community development department, was always there and ready to help with a smile and one of the friendliest people I've ever met. And she is going to be sorely missed here at the city. We also lost a couple of Shawnee legends over the weekend who did a lot for our community over the years and whose family has long-running ties in our history. So I'd like to also take some time for J.J. Miller and Connie Klein. And then I'd also like to take a moment for Isabella Ford, who had such an impact on the faith community in the city of Shawnee. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next, I'd like to explain our procedures for public input. During the meeting, I'll offer the opportunity for public input. If you'd like to speak to the council at any of those times, please come forward to the designated microphone. I'll ask you to state your name and address for the record, and then you may offer your comments. So that members of the audience can hear your comments, I would ask that you speak directly into the microphone. By policy, comments are limited to 5 minutes. No person may speak more than twice to any one agenda item. Only comments related to city business are permitted. Comments and remarks that are personal, impertinent, or slanderous are not permitted. Disruptive acts are not permitted. After you're finished, please sign the form on the podium to ensure we have an accurate record of your name and address. Additionally, comments can be submitted to the entire governing body at governingbody@cityofshawnee.org. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does anyone have any item they would like to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is mayor's items. I'd like to remind everyone this evening that after our Shawnee Council Committee meeting will begin directly after this meeting adjourns. Next item on the agenda is public items. Items number 1 and 2 related to the 2021 revised and 2022 budgets. Due to a publication error, the public hearings will be held on Monday, September 13th, 2021 at 6 p.m., and the budget notices will be republished. Item number 3 is to conduct a public hearing to consider projects for the 2022 Community Development Block Grant Annual Plan. This is the first of 2 public hearings to consider proposed projects for the CDBG funds, an estimated amount of $306,724. I'll accept a motion to conduct a public hearing and consider any other eligible projects related to the 22 CDBG Annual Action Plan suggested during the hearing.
Move to conduct a public hearing.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We're now in a public hearing. This is a formal public hearing required by law. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to conclude the public hearing.
Move to conclude the public hearing.
Second.
Motion has been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The public hearing is closed. Next recommended action is to consider establishing the following projects for inclusion into the 2022 CDBG Annual Action Plan. Barton Street Improvements, $217,404. Minor Home Rehabilitation Program, $25,000. Friends of Johnson County Developmental Services, $18,500. Johnson County Parks and Rec, $17,820. Salvation Army, $16,000. Metro Lutheran Ministries, $8,000. Catholic Charities of Northeast Kansas, $4,000. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 4 is to consider contract number 2021-067 excise tax abatement agreement with Shawnee Terra LLC for Staggs Grange Development, generally located at 6,000 block of Mara Road. Pursuant to policy, applicant has requested consideration of conditional abatement of the excise tax for a 14-lot single-family residential subdivision. Recommended action is consider approving and authorizing the mayor to sign the contract as approved by the city attorney. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Councilmember Jenkins?
Just for the record, Mayor, the excise tax abatement is still in effect right now, and until it expires in September, we're going to be looking at that as far as whether it extended, not extended, or whatever. But at this point, these abatements are already abated. I mean, it's more of a procedural activity which we're doing here. So I'd move to approve.
Second.
A motion has been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 5 is to consider contract number 2021-068 excise tax abatement agreement with James and Lucida Kim for River Ranch subdivision plat located at 6400 Mines Road. Pursuant to policy, James and Lucinda Kim have requested consideration of conditional abatement for the excise tax for a 2-lot single-family residential subdivision located at 6400 Mines Road. Recommended action is to consider approving and authorizing the mayor to sign the contract as approved by the city attorney. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 6 is to consider contract number 2021-069 excise tax abatement agreement with Shawnee Senior Villas LP for the Shawnee Senior Villas development located at 6300 block of Mara Road. Pursuant to policy, Shawnee Senior Villas has requested consideration of conditional abatement of the excise tax for the 42-unit senior apartment building located at 6300 block of Mara Road. Recommended action is consider approving and authorizing the mayor to sign the contract as approved by the city attorney. Does anyone on the council, anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is items from the council committee meeting of August 9th, 2021. Item number 1 is to consider revisions to policy statement number 7, PS7, conduct of public meetings. Council committee recommended approval for various revisions to PS7 pertaining to public comments, remote participation, and executive sessions. Recommended action is to consider approving revisions to policy statement 7. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Councilmember Kemling?
Yeah, I wasn't here for the committee discussion on this, but I don't like the idea of restricting public comment from 5 minutes to 3 minutes. I feel like it kind of sends the message that we're just telling them to hurry up and get out of here. And so I'm not a fan of that. I also not a fan of having to register in advance if you're going to speak items from the floor. I feel like it's just one more obstacle to let our citizens come in here and actually speak what they need to say. And I'm also, some of the language here is kind of where we're talking about personal and slanderous remarks. We're talking about disruptive behaviors, and we list untimely or repetitive talking. And I don't understand how that's a disruptive behavior if they're given a time limit and they want to repeat the same word for their 3 or 5 minutes. I don't understand why that's considered disruptive. But ultimately, I'm not in favor of passing these changes to PS7. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the council? Councilmember Thomas and then Councilmember Larson-Bonnell.
Yeah, I would agree. I think especially whenever we're talking about items that are on the agenda for us to vote on as a council. Folks may have had an opportunity, perhaps they couldn't come earlier to share their thoughts, and I think it's very reasonable just to continue to allowing that 5 minutes. I don't see a drastic need to reduce that time. I always welcome folks' input. And further, not everyone is as eloquent speaking in public as others, and so sometimes it might take a few minutes, a minute or two longer for folks to get their message out versus others that may be able to just, state it very quickly and straight to the point. So I have to say that I struggle with supporting any reduction of time, especially when it's agenda items that the council is getting ready to vote on.
Councilmember Larson-Bonnell.
Thank you. It is a priority of mine to make sure that our government is both open and accessible. One of the things that we discussed that I don't exactly remember where we landed because there was a lot of back and forth was the ability for the public to do live comments, but remotely. And I don't see that that was included here. In terms of the time limits, we had a very robust discussion about that. I could go either way on it. What made me be okay with where we landed was a discussion about how anytime that somebody was in the middle of a thought, we have always, as a custom, expanded their time. And so the 3 minutes was more of a goal for them to aim for. But that piece I could take or leave. I just want to know what happened to the remote public comment.
And I'm trying to remember, Stephen, do you remember? Because it was 3 minutes. Was it 2 years ago that it got changed to 5?
You're testing my memory. I think
you were the one that changed it. So it was always 3 until you wanted to extend it. Yeah, and you did the 5-minute one too.
I would have to go back and look. I can't remember. The last 18 months have been a blur, so the last 2 months are not that much more clear.
So it was around the same time, though, as the 30-minute.
Probably so for the citizen interest group.
So up until, well, my 13 years and then prior to me at that, though, I would say that the 3 minutes was not an issue. I mean, people weren't limited because they did get additional time, but it did keep things more focused and moving forward. So it was always 3 minutes up until the recent change, and it wasn't an issue. And most of the time, as the timekeeper, unless somebody is going very long, most of the people are done in about 3 minutes anyway, even with the 5 minutes. So I don't see an issue with the 3 minutes. Councilmember Nappen and then Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, I'd agree. I don't really want to go on record restricting the time for our residents. So I support the policy statement with the correction of going with 5 minutes of time. Thanks.
And before we had also discussed 3 minutes on the agenda items, 5 minutes on business from the floor, since business from the floor is to allow us background information that we didn't have because we don't know what they're just going to speak about until they speak. And that's kind of where I thought we had landed was the 3 on the agenda items and the 5 on the public, but maybe I'm wrong. Councilmember Jenkins?
Yeah, I just like to review the part about the remote attendance by city council members. Trying to remember what we wound up with in their final recommendation.
Same.
It was
Keep it at 2, right?
2, but,
Under special circumstances, that it could be shown that it was a particular hardship or something of those natures, like a lost member in the family
it
or
wasn't
something
determined
like that.
who would determine that.
Yeah, and I was recommending you would be determining that.
And others didn't want it to be.
So I think we need to pin that down is the thing. So who's the granting authority before we would, look at voting on this?
Councilmember Thomas?
To me, it makes sense it would be the mayor as the highest elected official in our city.
And the chair, yeah.
And chair of our meetings. I feel like it would be the mayor.
So if I'm not chairing the meeting, would it be whoever was chairing that night? If for whatever reason I happen to be gone, would it be the council president?
That's a good point. Yeah.
I think it would have to be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd say meeting chair, not mayor.
Okay.
Right?
You guys tell me what you
I'm good with that. I'm fine with it.
Everybody's nodding yes on that right now, so unless there's some pushback, we need to hear that.
Councilmember Larson Bonnell.
Not pushback, just a clarification. And we're talking about somebody that's exceeding the 2 meetings, whether, okay. Thank you.
So is that Councilmember Jenkins?
Another procedural question in voting for this. There's a number of items that some of us may say that's okay. There's some items in there that we may say, I don't like that part. So we got to vote on this as a whole package, which is going to make it, in my opinion, difficult for me to vote for because I don't like the change in the time frames that the people could speak. So I'm going to wind up voting no, but I don't necessarily want to vote no to everything in there. So I don't know how we're going to handle that.
So can we do like we did at the committee meeting and go item by item and vote as a council? Councilmember Nappen.
We could take the vote on it, and depending on where we land, we could have another motion. Because there's really, I don't know the item by item that's being disagreed with. The main thing seems to be this change in time. I don't want to speak for the others, but that's what it appears to be to me.
Councilmember Larson Bonnell.
Could we have council members request amendments and then to have discussion and either a straw poll or a vote on each of those amendments? And then once those are done, approve the whole thing with the amendments?
Okay, so we've heard time limit. We've heard who decides the over 2 meetings. Are there any other?
Mike brought up the...
And that was Councilmember Kimley. Okay, so those 3, and Councilmember Larson Bonnell, sorry.
The remote participation, and this would require advanced registration by community members so that they don't actually have to be at a meeting and can still participate.
I wanted to circle back on your original question. When we had the discussion at the last meeting, we said we would research that with the video streaming research that we're currently doing and bring sort of options back for that. So that's kind of where we landed with that public comment live during a meeting.
Thank you. I just, you had some other things outlined in your other discussion items, and I didn't see that there, so I appreciate that feedback. And also, thank you very much for the sign language interpreting clarification on the website.
Right, and I think with that, when you're doing the research, we have to look at several things. Are we going to allow 100 people to comment on each agenda item? We're going to have to go into a lot of detail on the remote comments on how that's even going to be logistically done stuff. So I don't think that's a discussion for tonight. I would rather wait till we have more information. Councilmember Jenkins.
It's just another concern about one of Councilman Kemling's concerns about submitting information in advance of the meeting. And I just wanted to flesh that out to be sure I understood what we were talking about. I don't think we ever said that you're going to have to notify the city clerk or city manager or anybody that you want to speak at the meeting. You can come and speak at the meeting without any kind of prior acknowledgement or anything like that. I think that was referring specifically to if you had a formal presentation, like a PowerPoint you wanted to present or something like that, in order to facilitate us being able to have that prepared for the presentation at the meeting. So am I understanding this correctly? I'm just trying to clarify this so that everybody understands where it is.
Yes, but the business from the floor, if somebody did show up because they did not know the policy, they were still going to be allowed to speak and just educated on the policy for the future.
Right. Yeah, we did make that caveat on there as well, that if this person didn't get the word, so here they show up and they want to do it, they can still do it. It'd be an educational process. It's probably going to take some time before it really gets out there and everybody understands what we're really looking at. And we'd like to get it a little early if we could, because that would facilitate our staff being able to present the stuff on the screen for everybody to view it.
And it wasn't agenda items, just business from the floor.
Right, just business from the floor.
Councilmember Kimley and then Councilmember Thomas.
Right, and so the section I'm referencing is on page 8 of the policy statement. And it says, anyone interested in addressing the governing body during business from the floor should register with the city clerk by noon on the day of the meeting. I don't see anywhere in there that it's only if you have PowerPoints or additional things. I mean, to me, this is a blanket statement.
That's a very good point.
And also, I guess to finish up that thought, how do we know if they knew about it or if they just showed up and said they didn't know about it? I feel like that's going to be a tough one to enforce when we have the written policy saying you can't, but then we make exceptions based on their trustworthiness and whether they actually knew about the policy or not.
I would think that, right, it would be difficult on somebody that's new, a new face, but if someone attends every meeting, they probably know the policy, and if they showed up and said they didn't, that could be more easy. But I've got Councilmember Thomas and then Councilmember Knappen and then Councilmember Jenkins. Councilmember Thomas?
Yeah, I know some folks, they may think, oh, I can't come and speak at that meeting, I have to work that night, but then they find out they have that night off or vice versa. Maybe they registered and all of a sudden they have to work. So
what if we did that it is preferred that they did? So to Councilmember Jenkins' point, we can be prepared, staff can be better prepared, everybody can be better prepared, but if they don't, it's not an issue.
Still going to speak.
But it's preferred that people sign up beforehand if they have business from the floor. I have Councilmember Knappen and then Councilmember Jenkins and then Councilmember Constance.
I would be in full support of that, the preferred language. And I guess I was okay with it in the discussion because we had said we're not going to restrict anybody. But we probably do need to put that wording in there. So I'm in full support. Thanks.
Councilmember Jenkins?
That's exactly where I was going. That's what my comment was going to be, is that we need to just couch the language in there and do a little wordsmithing where we strongly encourage or something like that for you to get this in, because it will enhance your ability to make your presentation or demonstrate this as some value to the person that's wanting to present.
Yeah. Now, if they have a presentation, I think we definitely need to have that beforehand, as we always have required. They can't just show up with a presentation. So I think the presentation, if they are wanting to give us a full presentation, they have to have that to staff to be able to prepare for us. And that's not changing anything. That's true now. But if they're just wanting to speak and they don't have a presentation, nothing for the screen, nothing for the overhead, then it's preferred they let us know beforehand, but it's not required.
Well, that's not always the case, though, because they do come in sometimes with a handout that they want to put on the overhead projector.
Yeah, but
that kind of stuff.
We currently ask for that beforehand. If they have a presentation, we currently ask for that beforehand. So we're not changing that. I mean, it's part of this policy if you want to change it to something different, but.
Yeah, I really wasn't aware of that, because it just seemed like there was ad hoc, and they were coming in here and they had may I show you this, and they would stick it on the overhead projector and we'd all look at it. And
for quite a while, the overhead hasn't been available. So everything they provide has to be digital, so they have to send that in beforehand.
Why don't we have the overhead projector? I think we should have that for something that's opaque and somebody wants to bring in a photograph or something like that and show it to the council to support their discussion. I think we should have that capability.
Yeah, this is Stephen Powell, Deputy City Manager. During COVID, it was, we were kind of discouraging people from bringing things and passing them out to people. It also, I think, is problematic showing the overhead on Zoom. So now all of our meetings still run through and are broadcast through Zoom. I don't know that old overhead projector can display on Zoom. I'd have to do some testing on that. But we could look into that and let you know. I will say 9 times out of 10 over the last couple of years, people who have wanted to present information during business from the floor have emailed the information to the clerk's office beforehand. We prefer that because it's a lot easier for us with the switching from devices to already have that stuff up and loaded and ready to go, and so we're not having to switch back and forth between things. So I don't want that to be a decision factor for you all, but we also talked about incorporating that information into the record after they were done. And sometimes if someone comes and puts a piece of paper on that overhead, they don't always give it to the clerk, and then we don't ever get a copy of it. And so, I think if they can give it to us beforehand, it's just easier because then we have it, and we can easily get it pulled up, and it can just be pulled up with all the other presentations and things that we're
that's being presented. It should be able to be seen by anybody that's remote as well, and not just the people in the room. Councilmember Constance?
I was just going to say I support the sign up, as everyone has been talking about, with allowing to educate the public about the process. I think that will allow the chair to more efficiently run the meetings and plan. So I think that's a great idea.
So can we wordsmith that so that that's our expectation, but it's not a requirement? We're not going to turn anyone.
Yes, I took some notes here, and I can just work with you on the wording of it if that's okay.
Okay. So we have that, and then the time limits. Do we want different time limits for public and agenda items? Do we want them all the same? How do we want to do that? And if we have a group, that's going to have an hour and 45 minutes worth of people, are we going to have a policy that has some type of limitation on that? I would prefer it not be left to the chair, because that, could be very arbitrary. So if that's going to happen, I think it needs to be part of the policy if the council is wanting to limit the public comment. Councilmember Jenkins?
Yes, I remember we had quite a lengthy discussion about that at the council committee meeting, and we talked about past practices and this was the chair. The chair would make an evaluation in the course of the discussion that
was an agenda item.
We're continuing to hear the same stuff over and over again. So you terminate it and say, look, we're going to just stop the discussion at this point unless you have something new or different to add. And if you do, we'd love to hear from you. But if you're just going to get up and say the same thing over and over again, we've already been over that ground. And I don't know why that wouldn't apply similarly to anything in business from the floor.
Councilmember Larson-Manel?
I think the other important idea that we brought up for business from the floor is any one of us at any time has the opportunity to say, look, we've heard from quite a few people that are interested in this topic, and they could make a motion then to have it added to a future council committee agenda or city council agenda, and we can vote on it. And that may or may not cut off public discussion, not intentionally. There may be some more people that want to come up and speak, but I think that the natural outcome of that is going to be that all the people that were there to talk about this new item are going to say, okay, we got what we came for. So we'll save it now for when it's our time to speak at council committee or at city council meeting.
So are we going to add some language about repetitive interest during business from the floor?
We can.
Under the advice of the city attorney?
This is not an ordinance. This is a policy.
And that's Councilmember Jenkins. I know, I just, as the chair, I don't want to find myself in a suit for cutting someone off. So I want to for First Amendment rights, I want to make sure that we are covered. Councilmember Larson-Manel?
I don't think we're asking for anyone to cut anybody off. What we're saying is what you've done in the past was very effective. And what you've said is, okay, everybody, here's some of the things that we've heard. And if anybody else wants to talk, you're more than welcome to, but here's what we've heard. And what I'm saying is we as the council can basically give them what they want. And I do think that that's going to sort of naturally, without us actually cutting off any conversation, that is going to make them want to stop coming and talking until the next meeting where we're actually going to be discussing it.
Okay.
So I don't think any clarification is needed.
You guys are comfortable with that? Because to me, the differentiator was agenda items versus non-agenda items. So with the agenda items, I could come in, we've received hundreds of emails, I could state, these are the things that we've seen in all of the emails, so I already had that information to be able to make that statement. do you have anything in addition to add to what we've already received from you in the emails? When people are coming in blindly from Business from the Floor, if we have not received hundreds of emails, I don't have that background information to give, which is what the difference was to me. Councilmember Jenkins?
You know, on that point, I wouldn't limit it to, if we've already heard an email, I wouldn't limit it to that, because not everybody maybe didn't have access to email or whatever. So it's when they start becoming very repetitive in the discussion, and one person after another is getting up and saying almost precisely the same thing. And at that point, you say, guys, okay, we're saying the same thing now, and then you can review, this is what we got in the email, this is what we've heard from the folks that have come in here and spoken to us. Is there any additional information anybody needs to add to what we've got? And I think that's a very reasonable approach.
Okay. The council's in agreement with that. Okay, so, yes, Councilmember Thomas?
I think too, it comes to be our responsibility as well. If you have several bullets that are, you know, so far in the last 20 minutes, we've heard this, and this. And as council folks, we also need to carry some of the responsibility to say, well, I also heard this, that perhaps didn't catch your ear, or perhaps caught our ear in a different way, and be a part of that contribution of, this is our picture thus far. Do we have it? Anybody else have something beyond this to share?
Yeah, just one last small comment. We do have a process, which we actually came up in our discussion a little while ago, where you could have up to 30 minutes to address the council with basically a formal presentation wherein you really express all your concerns and your pros, your cons, and you lay it out for the council. This is our argument. And I think if we are dealing with something controversial, and quite frankly, we usually know when something controversial is getting ready to come before us, at least on agenda items. Right. Now, we may not on Business from the Floor, but on agenda items, we know, okay, this is going to be one. A lot of people are going to come, and a lot of people are going to speak. And so we could encourage that they present kind of organize as a group and present as a group and make a cogent presentation, because that is such a better presentation, because you can actually develop your argument, you can support it with your PowerPoint and all this kind of stuff, and you can really get across your message so much more effectively than 30 people getting up, stumbling up to the podium one after the other to say essentially the same thing. And it just gets so redundant. It's actually almost negative for them, because you're starting to wear out your audience at that point. And it's actually probably not good for you if you're trying to present a point, to have the people you're trying to make the point to getting kind of frustrated with the fact they're listening to the same thing over and over again. And so I think that can be done. We could encourage, we encourage to utilize that process if there's a large group involved.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Because anytime we do anything like this, I want to make sure we're always consistent. So is there consensus on the consistency? Because I don't want one topic, 5 people start to get up and be repetitive, and another topic it's 3 people, and another topic it's 10 people. At what point does the council feel that the chair should then say, we are getting repetitive, here's what we've heard, if you have anything new, let us know. Otherwise, let's put it on a future meeting, because I don't want anyone saying, well, the chair listened to more of these people because they agreed with them, and like I said, the chair, not always me. Councilmember Larson-Manel.
So again, I don't think that the chair is cutting off conversation by basically summarizing what we've heard throughout the evening. And you're not saying, I am not going to accept any more speakers on this particular topic tonight. And I don't think any of us would want you to do that. But again, I think that summary does help people to kind of focus their thoughts, make sure that they are presenting things that might be new or different from what we already heard. And again, the council members do have the option, if they keep hearing something, to say, okay, let's have this on a future agenda, because Business from the Floor is not the best place for these kind of discussions to happen, because we can't discuss. It's not an agenda item. So the best thing that we can do as council members is get it to be an actual agenda item as quickly as possible. That's how we're going to serve our community. And I think that once we do that, it is going to effectively cut off Business from the Floor, not actually cut it off, but people are going to say, okay, great, it's an agenda item, and now we got to the next step, and they're not going to want to come to talk anymore.
Right, and I absolutely understand what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying, but just to put yourself in the position of the chair, if let's say one of Councilmember Thomas's neighborhood comes in, and by the third person, we're hearing all the same thing, and I say, okay, this is what we've heard. Do you have anything else to add? Should we put it on a future committee? That type of thing. But then your neighborhood comes in, and I allow 5 people before we get to that point. Then it's going to be, well, she only listened to 3 of my people, and then do you see where it's putting the chair in that position, though? So at what point is it fair to all? Councilmember Larson Bendel and Councilmember Knapp.
No, I really don't see that, because you're not cutting off conversation. What you're doing is just summarizing and saying, okay, this is what we've heard so far. And if somebody wants to come up and repeat that again, then, I mean, they have the right to do that. But again, I think that it does help them focus. And if it were Councilmember Thomas's neighborhood, for instance, my expectation would be that Councilmember Thomas would say, okay, yes, I would like to make a motion to put this on a future committee agenda. What dates do we think that we have available? And then we could have a quick discussion about whether to put that on. I just don't see it as a conflict, because it might take 3 people for one instance to figure out they're all saying the same thing. It might take 5 in the next instance to figure out they're all talking about the same thing, and that's fine.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Knapp.
Yeah, I just think it's situation by situation. And unfortunately, it is going to fall on you. I mean, it's somewhat of a judgment call. It's somewhat subjective. It depends on the conversation and how it unfolds. And we're saying that we have the confidence in you to guide the conversation, and we're comfortable with that.
And I would appreciate the council's support, like Councilmember Larson Bendel said, especially with your ward, or if it's a situation you're aware of and stuff, and not the heavy sighs and the eye rolls coming from council members as people are getting up to talk, because that doesn't help me. So I need help there. Councilmember Jenkins.
I would think there'd be an option too for council, not just to put it on a future agenda. There'd also be an option for a council member to say, well, you know, I disagree. I don't think we've heard all the discussion, and I move that we continue the discussion and pass a simple yes or no vote. And that would be your backup on that. You know, in other words, at that point, you know, you've got the council is supporting where you're at. We're comfortable with the fact we're getting ready to move on to another item or whatever. And if they're not happy with that, they would always have that option of raising a motion and saying, you know, I don't really feel like we fleshed this issue out fully, and I'd like to continue the discussion. I'd make a move that we continue discussion. And if everybody supports that, then we continue the discussion some more, you know, until we get to another culminating point or something.
Okay. Well, I just want to make sure that me or whoever the chair is that evening is running the most efficient, effective meeting for the governing body and for the residents. So just want to make sure everybody's on the same page and we've got consensus on how this is going to go, so that it's best for everyone involved. Okay, so you've got that. So is the other thing just the time limit, or did we're missing something else?
Executive session, we talked about, this is Tammy Thomas, that you must be present in person. At no time will someone be remote and be in an executive session or have a vote during that session.
So is time limit the last thing then to discuss? Okay, so do you need us to take a straw vote on time limit, or?
I want to just make one quick clarification on kind of what Councilmember Larson Bendel was talking about in terms of not necessarily cutting off conversation, but how to write that in a policy statement to where it gives you all the flexibility to do what you want to do. And the way the policy is written now is that we'll just use the agenda item time limit as an example for this, but right now it says it's 3 minutes, except where other limitations may be imposed by the mayor or acting chairperson, period. Is that broad enough to give you what you need to summarize maybe what you've already heard from emails or other things, but lets the council, you know, kind of chime in and say, well, I want to hear more discussion, or, you know, I'm ready to move on?
Well, I think that's been helpful with our agenda items when we have a full room.
Yeah.
If the council decides tonight to go back to stay at 5 minutes from the 3 minutes that we were, not go back to the 3 minutes, then then I think that helps if we have a room full of people. It gives the chair the ability to say, okay, we have 300 people here tonight to speak. We're going to take the time limit down to 3 minutes for this item.
And I think
but they still get the opportunity to expand time. The council can still extend the time.
Absolutely. And I think if you do end up doing 5 minutes for all comments, then I think we just need to add a little phrase at, after business from the floor that just says, public comments under business from the floor will follow the rule in section 3.2.1 that relates to agenda item comments in terms of time, and giving you the authority to impose other time limitations if we do have a large crowd, or if you're hearing a lot of the exact same comments, you can kind of move that discussion along a little bit if you want to. And that way it makes that consistent between those two items.
Well, and I think that gives the flexibility to help too, that the 5 minutes when they need it, but when we're with a large topic item to have the flexibility to go to the 3. So I think that kind of helps both things. Councilmember Nappen?
That's what I'm in favor of, is keeping it at 5 minutes and giving that extra wording. I actually think it's more fair for everyone in the room if we've got 300 people, if everybody gets 2 minutes or 3 minutes and more people get to speak as a result. So that's the in-between that feels good to me. I'd be comfortable with that language.
So with that, how do we publicly state that, though? Because I know with the one group, when we saw there was going to be a large group that night and I changed it from 5 to 3, I heard, well, they didn't know that beforehand. So how do we word that so that people don't have an expectation they're going to have 5 minutes, and then when they show up and there's 500 people, it's 3 minutes?
Sorry, Stephen. I don't think that this is a great idea. I was not in favor during the last meeting of decreasing time from 5 minutes to 3 minutes for the very reason that people had come prepared with remarks that they thought they were going to have 5 minutes to give. I would much rather us set a standard that if we want it to be shorter, then it's 3 minutes and we give extra time. That is the only reason that I was in favor of putting the 3 minutes in this policy statement, because there seemed to be people that wanted to have that flexibility. And I think that's not, it's a real disservice to our community members. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councilmember Jenkins?
I'm just trying to think where we could put this wording at, but I think the wording should be in there when you're looking at the agenda and you're thinking about coming to the meeting or whatever. There's a caveat there when you're reading through this that in cases or instances when there's a very large turnout to speak on one selected subject, the chair, mayor, or whoever's chairing the meeting will have the authority or option of reducing the amount of time per speaker in order to accommodate all present. Something along those lines. I'm not stuck on those specific words, but something of that nature. And that way, if I'm looking at the agenda, I say, wow, okay, there's going to be a big crowd on this one. You know, they may cut me down to 3 minutes. So at least there's some kind of heads up that there may be an adjustment to time if you're coming into a meeting with a very large crowd like that. Instead of, I don't know how else to do it other than to put it as some kind of right up front. That's a known fact that if we get in one of these situations where we've got 200 people show up or something like that, the mayor or the chair may exercise their prerogatives of shortening the time for each person so that more people can speak.
Councilmember Larson-Manel and then Councilmember Chafee.
And this is exactly where having an early sign up would help, because what my concern is in that situation is I want us to be as objective as possible of how we're defining large crowd. So if it's 25 speakers, if it's 30 speakers, I don't know what that number is, but that's really easy to tell if you have people signing up in advance. And, you know, maybe the rule can be if more than 25 people sign up, the time will be reduced to, and I just throw that number out, of course, time will be reduced to 3 minutes. Like that would be much more fair and transparent.
So where I kind of struggle with that is I see more of those that are all coming for the same thing being cut down, but then Joe Citizen, who comes for a totally different topic, then he's cut down to 3 minutes too, even though he's not part of the large group.
That's still good.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify whether we're lumping this time discussion into both public comments and business from the floor. I know you've mentioned several times about seeing them sort of separately, which I don't disagree with. I think Councilmember Thomas kind of had presented it. You could look at it both ways. I sort of agreed with when it's an agenda item, we have this wealth of background and we have all of the information in the packet and we sort of know, we have a starting point from where the citizen is speaking from, as opposed to business from the floor. We have no idea what they might be coming to speak about, and it may take longer. So I was just clarifying so that I'm understanding as we're talking about this, if we're lumping them both together or if there's any consideration to maybe having business from the floor continue to be 5 minutes and the agenda items be 3.
And again, even if we went to 3 minutes on the agenda items, they're not limited to 3 minutes because the council can continue to give them more time, or if you want to give the chair more flexibility so that people aren't coming expecting 5 minutes, the flexibility of the expectation is 3 minutes, but I have the flexibility that if it sounds like they're coming to the end of their point, to go ahead and let them go up to 5 minutes before asking the council to extend their time. But then that's a judgment call of the chair. Are they continuing a point, or are they just continuing to repeat themselves of whether to cut them off at 3 or allow them to go to 5 before asking the council to give them more time? And that, to me, again, would just be agenda items. I think the business from the floor could be 5 minutes. Just throwing random thoughts out there to see if Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, I think I agree with some of the councilmen here that are really wanting to kind of standardize it. So it isn't this for this action, that for that action. People know it's a 5-minute deal. And so I'd think it'd be, for the sake of consistency and better clarity and understanding for the folks that do want to come to City Hall and speak, to keep it at 5 minutes and just have it. That's kind of the going number, 5 minutes. So I'd want to stand by that.
Okay. Well, should we go ahead and do a vote on the Councilmember Larson Manel?
Just a point of order, since we do have a lot of community members here today, should we ask if there are any comments on this before we take our straw poll votes?
Sure. Oh, Councilmember Zimmerman?
My apologies. Inadvertently got my hand up. Disregard. I'm sorry.
Anyone from the audience that would like to speak to this item? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Not part of this 5 minutes.
No. The podium's now like an Easter egg hunt.
See, I can't even walk straight anymore. Ray Ehrlichman, 7510 Garnett Street. Make life easy. If you turn to page 5 of the policy statement, let's drop down item number 5, personal and slanderous remarks. Any person making personal, impertinent, slanderous, false, repetitive, blah, 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 blah. I have a problem with that. We have 2 attorneys in the room right now that I know of, a member of the council and the city attorney. And they will both probably, if you ask them, tell you that there are people that sue other people for slander. They'll also tell you that sometimes juries will go out for days and weeks to come up with a decision as to whether or not it's slanderous. And yet we're asking, whether it's the mayor, an acting chairperson, a chairman of a committee, we're asking or saying that a person sitting in that position is going to make that determination right at the spur of the moment. I think that's impossible. Because what might sound slanderous might prove to be very, very non-slanderous if the facts are known. Impertinent, I don't know, without going to your computers, how many people can give us a full definition of impertinent? What is impertinent? I don't like that. I think we're asking a person to make a snap decision on something that may turn out to be a bad snap decision. I'm not going to go into detail tonight because I don't want to get into an argument because we're not supposed to. But I know of two specific instances where two members of the community were shut down on speaking to the council. And then afterwards, the individual chairing on two separate occasions, chairing the meeting when they were presented with certain information, admitted, whoops, we made a mistake, we're wrong. Those two people should not have been shut down. But it was too late. They never got their comments across. So I'm not going to go into the time limit aspect. I think that's been pretty well covered by most of the council members. But I think this section 5 here is very, very ambiguous. I think it gives a person too much authority and power that they don't necessarily have the ability to exercise in an appropriate manner. That's all. And gee, I think I might have even done that in less than 3 minutes.
Yep. You're always less than 3 for the most part. Anyone else like to comment on this item?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. My name is Don Lysett. I live at 6850 Bell Road, and I'm going to try and get my comments limited to 4 minutes. That was supposed to be a little levity there. But also there's a point to that. You know, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, say it is 4. You've had several of the members have talked about the chair has the prerogative to extend it. It boils down to some common sense here. I think we're trying to make much ado about nothing. If you're fair to everyone, that's all anyone can ask. So arbitrarily, let's say it is a 4-minute limit, and someone exceeds that. And as you, Mayor, said, I'm going to give them some latitude if they're wrapping it up. If they're still going off on tangents, say you've got 1 more minute or whatever you decide. Because everyone wants to speak. I've been in that seat. Sometimes it gets really, really redundant. You're the same person say the same thing, or several people say the same thing. And that's when you can step in and say, we've heard this, this. Well, we understand that. Is there someone who would like to speak that is not going to address this, and this? And that will move things along. I don't think there's any magic number there. It's common sense, it's common courtesy, it's decency. I do have one thing I want to talk about in subsection, I think it's G2, it's on page 4 of the policy statement, talking about getting written materials to you all ahead of time. Fully understand why. The problem is, oftentimes from the perspective of the speakers, such as myself, that agenda comes out maybe Friday evening or sometime Friday day. To get it to you all by noon on Friday doesn't work. I've brought this up several times. I think this is an ideal situation to discuss it again, not necessarily this evening. Why can't we get the minutes out 1 week, or excuse me, the agenda out 1 week before the council meeting? Why is it we have to get them out on Friday for a meeting 3 days later? Doesn't give you a lot of time to review it. Doesn't give me or any citizen a lot of time to review it. Open that window up to a week. Those problems are solved. If I want to put together materials, then yes, I need to get them to you by noon the Friday before the Monday. I think, I don't know, that just to me, again, it's very common sense. And especially in the context, say it's a development, we all know how those go sometimes. You've got a developer that's been working on a project for months, if not years, and you're asking the common citizen to respond in 72 hours. There should be some fairness there. Just as a footnote, I think Ray actually makes a good point. I don't know if I thought I'd ever hear myself say that, but the slander thing, that gets difficult. I don't know if you need to have that in black and white. That's a judgment call and one that could be made wrong. At that point, I think your option is just to close the discussion. Thank you.
Anyone else from the audience that would like to speak to this item? Okay, seeing none, I guess, Stephen, do you need from us a straw poll on 3 or 5, or maybe even go with the 4 minutes?
Yeah, I think if you all would like to start with 3 to 5 minutes for agenda items, or if you want to lump it all together for business from the floor as well, just direction on how you'd like that to play out.
Okay, so why don't we do a motion first on the time limit for agenda items?
Motion to make the time limit on agenda items 5 minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to make time limit on agenda items 5 minutes. Councilmember Thomas?
Yes.
Councilmember Kimling?
Yes.
Councilmember Jenkins?
Yes.
Councilmember Nappin?
Aye.
Councilmember Shelby?
Aye.
Councilmember Constance?
Aye.
Councilmember Larson Bonnell?
Aye.
Councilmember Zimmerman?
Yes.
Okay, 8-0. And then time limit for business from the floor. I'll accept a motion.
Motion to make the time limit for business from the floor 5 minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Thomas?
Yes.
Councilmember Kimling?
Aye.
Councilmember Jenkins?
Aye.
Councilmember Nappin?
Aye.
Councilmember Chaffee?
Aye.
Councilmember Constance?
Aye.
Councilmember Larson Bonnell?
Aye.
Councilmember Zimmerman?
Yes.
8-0. So we'll retain the 5 minutes. Councilmember Nappin?
Just for clarification, are we keeping in there the wording that allows you to, the authority to extend or change it? Okay, thank you.
I believe so, if that's the council's direction. So the council has to vote to extend anyone's time, but I can limit if need be. Councilmember Larson Bonnell?
Just to clarify, nothing has changed. Am I correct? I just want to make sure that I'm keeping up here. Okay. I still have serious reservations about the ability to arbitrarily limit how much time is going to be allowed. I'll stop. Thanks.
I understand, because I share your concerns, and like Mr. Lysott had said, it puts the chair in a tough position. But I mean, we've done it effectively in the past. We've said, okay, we've heard you're concerned about traffic, property values, crime, the list, and is there any new additional information, and if not, we are well aware of those issues. And Councilmember Larson.
And that's fine. I'm totally fine with that. What I have a problem with is the idea that at the beginning of a meeting, we're going to look at the size of the crowd and say, okay, we are going to be decreasing our time to 3 minutes right now. I'm really not in favor of that. Unless we decide exactly what our criteria is. And the only way that I can think to do that is having a sign up. Now, it could be a sign up at the beginning of the meeting. I could see that just to see what kind of list we're looking at. But we need to have objective criteria if we're going to arbitrarily at the beginning of a meeting decrease the amount of time.
I would feel more comfortable with that. And I think, was it Councilmember Jenkins? And if I'm misspeaking, please let me know. Didn't you say 25 people, or was that somebody else that said that?
Somebody else actually said the word 25. But I think you could put some sort of, I don't think it'd be difficult to identify some sort of number, and I think a sign-up list would be good. I mean, if we've done that before when we've had large crowds, we passed the sign-up list in for who was going to speak, and then they got to speak in the order they signed up, and that gave you a really good feel for, what we're looking at in terms of the number of people that are wanting to speak. And So I don't think that's arbitrary at that point. You're still saying the word arbitrary, but once you've had if you got a list and all that stuff, you're not being arbitrary anymore. You're basing it upon, you're making a sound judgment call. And it is a judgment call, no doubt about it, but it's not arbitrary or capricious. It's a judgment call that, we only got so many hours to meet. And in order to give everybody an opportunity, I'd rather give everybody an opportunity to limit the opportunities to a smaller number that take more time. So I think in all fairness, that's fair too. So that's recognizing fairness. So it's kind of a trade-off there. It's a balancing act to a certain extent.
And that's my biggest thing. I just want to make sure whatever the decision is, that we're consistent and fair. Councilmember Larson Manel.
I'd like to make a motion that we offer a sign-up sheet for, I guess we're only talking about business from the floor right now, although I think that this could apply equally to any agenda item. And if there are more than 12 people that sign up, then at the chair's discretion, they can decrease the amount of time.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Councilmember Larson Manel.
Aye.
Councilmember Constance.
Aye.
Councilmember Chaffee. Councilmember Nappen.
Aye.
Councilmember Jenkins.
Aye.
Councilmember Kenley.
Aye.
Councilmember Thomas.
Aye.
Councilmember Zimmerman.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 8-0. Okay, so now we have those things handled. Do you need just the policy as a whole? The rest of the policy?
Sorry, let me get my stuff together. I think the other thing that was brought up was the registration under business from the floor, doing that beforehand. I think Councilmember Kemling.
Encourage,
okay.
but not required.
So I've got that language. The other one.
But if somebody wants access to the system and what we're broadcasting online, we have to receive that beforehand.
Okay. Let me scroll through and see what other.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Jenkins.
And Stephen, I think put the language in there in a way that's very positive for the person that's wanting to speak, in order to make sure that we give you every bit of support you'll need. It'd be very helpful if you could get that to us by this time. So it's not saying you're doing it to help us, but you're doing it to make sure that you have the opportunity to make the presentation you want to make.
Right. It's not punitive. It's so that we're not trying to figure out technology at the last minute and stuff like that. Councilmember Larson Manel.
So I do want to recognize that staff has done a really good job of making sure that we're getting agendas by like Wednesday, the day before a meeting, and that has been helpful. To Mr. Lysott's point, I am curious, is Friday really the latest that we could accept materials? Or could we do, say, Monday by 9 a.m. or something like that to make it a little bit more fair?
Stephen Powell, can I ask you to clarify what you're asking if we can get you packets before that, or if we...
No, I'm talking about members of the public that have presentation materials.
Oh, that's a policy decision. I think if you want to change that to Monday at noon before the meeting, that can be done as well.
But to Eric's point, as long as the public is aware that those of us that have full-time jobs during the day, if they don't get it to you until Monday, we may not see it before the council meeting because we're at work all day. So just so that the public is aware, if they wait till Monday to get it to us, we may not have time to preview it before the meeting. Councilmember Jenkins.
Yes, I just didn't want to move on from PS7 and go to any kind of final vote on just accepting PS7 until we take into consideration some of the comments that were made by people in attendance at the meeting. I think there's some fairly good comments made there and things that we maybe should take into consideration. I think the part about determining whether somebody's libelous or uncivil and that kind of stuff, that is a tough call. And of course, we don't want a totally disrupted meeting either. So that's a tough one for the chair. And it's going to be somewhat subjective. I'm not sure what language to put in there, quite frankly. That needs some wordsmithing probably. And I think we need to sit down with the city attorney and try to generate something that's protective of your position as the mayor, so you're not sitting here calling somebody slanderous necessarily, and that wasn't slander. And now you've jeopardized the city and yourself in that position. So I think we really need to hammer that language out a little better. I don't think what we've got right now is something that we necessarily want to go forward with. And then the part about the agendas, I've been in favor of that for a really long time, getting the agenda out earlier. I don't know why. It's our agenda. If somebody doesn't make a certain deadline, then you'll be in the next agenda. Okay, I'm sorry, but you did. I think there's nothing that precludes us or prohibits us in any way for sending the agenda out on Friday a week out. And that really would give people some time. It'd give me some time too, because I can tell you I'm scrambling sometimes to go through this massive amount of material that I'm presented with by the staff. That's a lot of stuff to go through. And if I don't get it till Friday afternoon, and good Lord, you got families and other things going on too. So it's not like you got every minute from the time you receive that packet, just sit down and review it and read everything. Sure, it'd be nice to have a little more time. I think it would be helpful to the staff too, because there are times when you don't have a chance to ask them some questions and get some clarification until Monday. And if you can't get a hold of them right away, you're zinging the staff right here in a council meeting, and they're going like, wow, why'd you blindside me on that? Well, hell, I didn't have this stuff until, I didn't get a chance to even read it until just now. Okay? So yeah, I'm having to ask the question and put people on the spot right here in the meeting. I can't do clarification outside the actual meeting with the staff. So I think it'd be very helpful if we had that information earlier. We could read it, digest it, and then maybe if I got a question, I can call the city manager, assistant city manager, the deputy city manager, the police chief, or whoever we need to call to get the information that would, okay, I understand, I got it, I understand what we're doing, and that would really be helpful. So I can't overemphasize the fact of getting that agenda out a week earlier than we're getting it right now would be extraordinarily helpful and beneficial.
Councilmember Constance and Councilmember Thomas.
So 2 points brought up. First, the wording, specifically slanderous. I guess I would like to just ask our city attorney, is it problematic to have the language as written? I would assume that you read this before giving it to us, so I feel confident with the language that is here, knowing that our attorney signed off on it. So that is my first question. Are you comfortable with the language as written?
Yes, I am, and actually that wasn't just a hodgepodge guess. Those terms are actually a laundry list of definitions and permitted restrictions that have come from cases over the years, for a great number of years. I don't even know when we started. I think since you started, Mayor, we've probably added 2, and they were all based on specific cases. So it was a specific term. I remember this specific word, and I'm not going to go into the case where the court said, yes, that was something you should have limited because it was slanderous. And yes, it is hard to determine. That's why the job of the chair is awful. It's not easy. That'd be the last thing I would do. But yes, to answer your question, is there's specific words that I took from specific cases over the years. Some of them we already had, but some we added, and slanderous was one that was specifically permitted by an appellate court.
So with that information, I'm fully in support of keeping that language, knowing that our city attorney has reviewed it. The second piece on timing, I do recall we discussed the timing of the packet with city staff at a retreat about 2 years ago. I would like to know, would moving the timeline back be helpful, or is that difficult for staff? I know hours upon hours probably go into putting these together. So I certainly wouldn't want to change the timeline such that work gets sloppy. It's difficult to get all of the information in. So I'd like to ask the people that create the packet, what is the most helpful timeline?
Well, I think as I think Councilmember Larson-Vidal mentioned, I think for, last year, a few years, I think we've been trying to get the packets out on Wednesday. I think this packet may have actually gone on Thursday morning. But we've done a pretty good job, I think, of trying to get them out earlier to try and address those issues. Part of it is just a timing standpoint. As you guys may notice, sometimes we've actually published packets. The minutes aren't actually finished. We add those at a later time. Sometimes, depending on the schedule, we've got items coming out of Planning Commission, so being able to turn those items around for the packet. So really, I think you just get
potentially hit on both sides in terms of missing a meeting from a development planning perspective. Some of these things then would get pushed to the next meeting. So you kind of, you run the gamut of some of those issues, I guess, just depending on how the timing works, factor in a holiday or two or things like that, where things get pushed around. So I think we've done a pretty good job of trying to get those packets out on Wednesdays before the meeting. But again, if that's the direction of the council, we would just have to look at our schedule and modify as needed.
With that information and knowing that you all have been moving to get them Wednesday, Thursday, and knowing that residents can submit things to be shared by the Monday, I am very comfortable keeping the same timeline. As an elected official, I'm fine with that 4 to 5 days to review the packet. That's my perspective on those two.
Councilmember Thomas and Councilmember Kimling.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that the public is going to have some extra time. I think having a Monday noon deadline to have examples or whatever type of presentation they would have is reasonable. Many folks that work, or perhaps they travel to their job or over the road or whatever it is, being considerate and making that wider window for them so that when they present something, perhaps we can receive it on that Monday. I think it's just considerate for the public. And in my case, it would be wait for my kids to get home from college or wherever so they could help me make the presentation.
Well, yeah, just to that point, so if they wait till then to get it, I may not see it before the meeting.
Right.
My schedule won't allow me, so just so that they're aware of that.
And just also say, how many times do we have that? We don't have it that. I mean, it's not like we've got folks backed up with presentations that we've not seen. I mean, and perhaps I'd love to see it grow. That means people are involved in coming to the council, but I don't think it's often enough to make a hardcore cutoff that people can't turn something in.
Councilmember Kimling, and then Councilmember Knappen, and then Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, so back with Lisa's original idea, talking about maybe something like a Monday morning at 9, I would be in favor of that, because then you get all weekend to look at it and submit something. Packets did used to come out Thursday night, and that was tough, because I'd have to read them Friday morning and try to have a discussion that day, or else we had the meeting on Monday, the next business day. So I'm glad that they come out on Wednesdays. I think it's an improvement from when we first got here. I would love it if we could even get them earlier. I think it would just be beneficial. And then with that wording on page 5.5, personal and slanderous remarks, this was one of the ones I made a comment on at the beginning, and I don't know, I just think it sounds harsh when we're citing, municipal code and it's a Class A violation, and I feel like some of the things in those lists to me don't seem to be disruptive. And the one I had pulled out was untimely or repetitive talking. I mean, if they're within their time limits, I just don't see that being a Class A violation. And so I'm just not in favor of the language that's currently in 5.5.
Councilmember Knappen, and then Councilmember Jenkins, and then Councilmember Larson.
Yeah, I don't think we've officially decided, but it seems like we've got pretty good consensus, or maybe at least ready to take a vote on moving the time period for residents to get something in.
Past time.
What?
Hey, Matt, sorry, can you hear us?
I can now, thank you.
I'm sorry about that. Just a moment, okay?
No problem.
You. The frustration with the technology. Don't. You're fine.
Good. We good? So I can
Continue.
All right.
Remember Nappin.
Yeah, so before that happened, I was just trying to move the conversation along. It sounds like we've got some pretty good consensus here that we would love to move the time period that residents have to send in a presentation to noon on Monday. And that would give address a concern that residents brought and give those folks the weekend to put together additional information to share with us. Knowing, to the mayor's point, that we may not have the time to go through it, but they're going to have the time in front of us to present it to us that night. So I think that makes sense. I don't know if, can I make a motion on that one? Oh, you're still waiting in line. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jenkins, Councilmember Larson Manel.
Yeah, I'm going to comment once again on the timeliness of the packets. And I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this thing that we got to have these packets out on Wednesday instead of earlier. Because frankly, once you establish the new time frame for when the packets are going to come out, there's this little bitty hiccup for that first one. After that, the next packet's out 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks, the same as they are right now. So what's the rub, guys? I mean, you got that initial transitional one where maybe it's a 3 week, but then as soon as you get everything back adjusted on an equal footing, it's going to be 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, just like we're doing right now. But it's going to be a whole lot more convenient for everybody, really. Maybe even the staff when you get right down to it. So, you know, this thing about what's the easiest for the staff, that's not my major consideration anyway. My major consideration is the people we serve. That's the reason we have these meetings, is so that we can share what's going on with the agenda and so on with the public and get their input. It's not to serve the staff. And this is certainly no slam against the staff, but that's not how we build everything. We don't build it around what's the easiest for the staff. We build it upon what is most effective for our community and our communications with our constituents and so on. So I'm having trouble getting my head wrapped around those comments. Well, it isn't all about whether it's easier for the staff. And if you follow my drift here, like I say, it's the initial hiccup it's going to be like a 3 week period between meetings, between the staff getting stuff together. But after that, it's going to fall right back in line with 2 weeks apart again. And the only difference is that we're going to have a whole lot more time to look at it. The public's going to have a lot more time to look at it, prepare any comments if they've got them, hash it over with their friends or whatever. I mean, that is so much better than what we're doing right now. And I don't understand why anybody would push back against that. That just seems so logical and commonsensical that it kind of blows my mind somebody doesn't want to do that, frankly.
So possibly the best time to do that would be when we're going to cancel a council meeting anyway, because everything that would have been on that agenda, then that meeting gets canceled because of a holiday or whatever reason we cancel it. Well, then those things go on the next meeting. That's already 2 weeks in advance. So maybe that would be the best time to do something like that, is when we have
or if it's a light agenda, even with nothing that's really pressing. If it's one of those agendas like we're granting excise tax exemptions and we're saying yes to the sewer pipe being fixed and that kind of stuff, where you're really not dealing with a lot of public comment, it would be pretty easy to shift that one. It wouldn't be very difficult to move that meeting a week, and you just fall right back in the line. You're right back in step again with everybody with you and move on. I just don't see where that's a big issue. That's why it's a big problem. And I really think it'd be easier on the staff because they're not going to be scrambling around. Oh my God, we got to get this out Wednesday. And I mean, you've got a little more time to work with it, guys. And I think that'd be, I just think that's a win-win. I don't understand the pushback. So that's my comment on that.
Councilmember Larson Manel and then Councilmember Constance.
Okay, two things. When we first started talking about the materials and when they would be due, we were talking specifically about presentation materials and sort of envisioning that as somebody that was going to be coming to a meeting and presenting those materials. And for that, you know, having that on Monday, no big deal because they're going to present it on that evening anyway. However, our new regulation does allow for written public comment, and they're actually in the same section. So if we change this, it means that written public comment can be until Monday as well. And that, I think, is more significant about us not having time to review them. However, I have a solution. My recommendation would be that if staff are collecting these public comments, if you could please organize them in a way to the governing body so that they are hopefully organized by topic. And if it's something that's a slam dunk, and I know that things rarely are, but just in case it is a sort of yay or nay, if they could be divided into the yay pile and the nay pile, that would be incredibly helpful as we're trying to get through information. So that's my comments on that. I will go along with the 9 a.m. on Monday if we can have that help to help get through that material. I'm sorry, noon on Monday. I'm sorry.
But that's why I made those comments I made. If we had the packet a week earlier, that's not going to be hard meeting the Friday deadline at that point. I mean, so we don't really need to press ourselves into this predicament where we're trying to squeeze this information and try to get it out to everybody in a half a day on Monday. So that's why another good endorsement for let's do a jump shift on the way we're putting the agenda out and get it so it's coming out a week prior. That seems like a really good deal.
Councilmember, here is why I would not be in favor of that. We've heard from city staff that some of the things that are difficult are actually preparing materials that are happening at other meetings. And unless you are also going to be adjusting the times of those other meetings, we're going to end up with a situation where we really are slowing down business. And I think a perfect example of that is these animal ordinances that we're about to talk about. This was something that came as a constituent concern to me and then also to council members Constance and Chelsea because it was a Ward 4 issue. And it has been going on for months that they have been trying to deal with this issue that is really affecting their business. I am very concerned that we're not nimble enough if we're trying to push the agendas that far ahead. I would potentially support doing that if we could talk about potentially modifying the agenda with less notice. So being able to amend it during that time period that it's sitting with us, because I think that things do come up that we need to be able to address in a more timely fashion. However, that is worse for us, I think, than just having a packet that can't be modified. So I'm very conflicted about this. I actually do think that this will slow down city business if we move to this. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
That was Councilmember Larson-Bonnell. Councilmember Constance?
Certainly. My question for staff that I would maybe like to just reframe and ask again wasn't so much whether it would be easy for you one way or another, but in which instance of timing for the packets are we able to get the most correct information, move quick, respond as things come in through the other meetings that are happening? Which instance would work more smoothly to better benefit the residents and those bringing business before the council? And also, would there be unintended consequences for changing the timeline? And we don't necessarily have to dig in right now, but before I would vote to change it, I'd want to understand, there could be more to it that I don't know as someone who's never created a packet for the city. So I would love some feedback on that if we are going to move down and discuss this further.
Part of it is like I kind of referenced earlier, is just from a minute standpoint. Okay, that might not be the biggest issue to wait, skip a meeting for minutes. Part of it's planning items from Planning Commission and turning those around. I think Councilman Larson-Bonnell referenced some of those examples. So really, just from a timing perspective, we've about got it crunched up as far as we can, unless to her point, we're skipping a meeting and not addressing those again, so that would kind of delay it. So really just kind of preference of the council, but just know that we could also get some pushback the other way if we're kind of skipping a council meeting, so why didn't we address it then? Well, if we got agenda deadlines and things before that, then we can get that out, so that you run into some challenges with that.
So to that point, I guess I'm still confused. How is it that other city councils get their packets more in advance? What are they doing differently? Can we do what they're doing?
I would have to go back and look again from my experience, and from what I know, and Stephen probably knows better. I mean, we get our packets out pretty early. I mean, my experience is usually a Thursday, Friday for kind of Monday, Tuesday meetings. So usually you try to have that weekend built into that. But that's really the experience that I've had in terms of getting packets out. I think we're kind of at that kind of front edge, I think, of putting packets out there so that you all can see them.
I had heard differently, but I have nothing to confirm that. That is just what I had heard. So,
I will tell you, this is Stephen, I'm sorry. From my years of experience as city clerk and going to the city clerk conferences and talking about how difficult it is to produce a packet in a short amount of time, like it varies across the board. You know, when I worked in Johnson County as clerk, they had weekly meetings. So, you know, they would review the meeting for next week before they had their business session. So I think a lot of it depends on the number of council meetings that you have in a month. A lot of cities, primarily smaller cities, just have one meeting a month. They may only have one planning commission a month. And so there's not sort of that rolling set of dates and meetings that need to coincide in order to pull all that information together. And, you know, I'm still very involved in producing the council packets every couple weeks. And, you know, while I don't want to say it's hard for staff to do anything because it's time consuming, it's not difficult unless you're, you know, needing to track down someone for a question. But, you know, now that we're doing 2 council packets for every council meeting day instead of the one, you know, that adds another thing that we have to have prepared for the council night because we have 2 meetings on Monday nights now.
so that makes sense. And it's probably the smaller cities that only have the one meeting, why they get their packets sooner.
Yeah. So I think we can bend as much as we can, but you know, I think it'll be challenging to get it out much sooner than Wednesday without having to push certain items off to the next meeting, which could be 2 weeks, it could be 3 weeks if there's 5 weeks in a month. If it's a canceled meeting, it could be a little longer than that. But
I think the other component of this is just the level of detail and information in our packets compared to some other cities. Again, in my opinion, our agenda packets and agenda memos are extremely detailed. You may not find that in some of these other cities. So again, if the council is willing to see a shorter memo or less information, again, then these packets take less time to produce and put out. But I think really the concern is just from the timing perspective of, you know, again, if we change planning commission, things like that, we're not having that rolling piece of it. But I think a lot of it too, just in terms of the staff side, is just making sure that level of detail and what you all expect is in the packet. So that's really kind of the time consuming part on the staff side of it.
Councilmember Chafee, then Councilmember Jenkins.
I just wanted to say that I recall at some point during my time on the council, so within the last year and a half or so, we have backed up. I mean, maybe not officially, but there was a request from the council that packets came out earlier, and they're coming out earlier. Mm-hmm. So now we're right back there and saying back it up even further. I am fully comfortable with the Wednesday, sometimes Thursday morning. If you guys decide, hey, we're going to just see if we can get it out on Tuesday, see what that looks like, but I am 100% not in favor of giving that directive. We've just done that, and I am comfortable with the Wednesday/Thursday morning. And I appreciate the level of detail and work that goes into the packets.
Yeah, and I want to give credit to the pushback that we have gotten to our current leadership team, because it's been something council's asked for decades and wasn't able to happen. So I want to thank you guys for even getting it pushed back for 3 days, because that's huge compared to before. Councilmember Jenkins?
Yes, I'd like to redirect one more time. The meetings are still going to be 2 weeks apart, okay? There's no change in the time frame for the staff to prepare the packets. That's all just smoke and mirrors. I don't know what that's all about. Once we got onto the new schedule, then it's still going to be 2 weeks to the next meeting, 2 weeks to the next meeting, and so on, same as it is now, except we're just going to have our packets at a different time. So I don't get all this frustration and, oh my gosh, how are we going to handle this and all that stuff. It's pretty darn straightforward. I mean, once you get into the new groove, I mean, it's just a repeat of what we're doing now, essentially, except the packets are coming out a week earlier. So that's pretty frustrating when we're sitting there pushing back against that concept. That's a pretty simple concept. 2 weeks is 2 weeks. Unless you're using a different calendar than I use, that's the way it is. So once, like I said, we'd have this small hiccup on the first one, a little speed bump there as we transition to this new one where we're getting the packets out a week early. But once we're into that new mode, it's still 2 weeks apart. They still got exactly the same amount of time to put a packet together. And they're going to have a lot more opportunity to be able to coordinate what's in that packet with the council and the governing body and have any kind of discussion or whatever prior to the meeting. It's going to me, it'd be a market improvement. And so I'm just, 2 weeks is 2 weeks, guys. I mean, I don't get this where suddenly we got to get the packets out more. It's going to be more difficult to get the packets out. You're getting the packets out in 2 weeks now. So you're not going to be able to get the packets out in 2 weeks once we transition to this new time frame. It doesn't make any sense.
Councilmember Larson-Manel.
So the difference is that you would be looking at everything essentially a week later, potentially, or even 2 weeks later than you might have. And the reason is that we've heard from staff that it takes them from that last, and you'll have a chance to speak, but this is what I understood, that this is how long it takes to put together a packet from the date of those previous meetings that are not council meetings. So if it takes, say, 13 days, and you're saying, well, we want the packet in 11 days, that means that those things that actually took 13 days are going to have to be pushed to the next meeting. So you're right, our frequency of meetings isn't changing, but how quickly things rotate do change, and that makes us less nimble. That's my concern.
That was on the Planning Commission meeting last Monday, right? Last Monday. They get in the packet by Wednesday for us to have this Monday. So the Planning Commission last Monday, if we get the packet that far in advance, it wouldn't have been this council meeting, it would have been the next council meeting. So that's what the issue is, because the Planning Commission meeting was Monday. They got us the packet out Wednesday. So that was within 3 days of the Planning Commission meeting.
See, this is Jenkins. The Planning Commission is dealing with the same issue we're dealing with, because they got some huge packets as well. I spent 20 years in the Planning Commission. They got the whole darn site plan and everything else in there. They got a whole lot of stuff to digest. So I think it'd be very appropriate for them to join us in the shift. And then you don't have the problem that's being presented. Okay. Everybody just shifts 1 week.
So I think for tonight, let's agree to continue to look at that and have further conversation. And then tonight we'll just look at the policy, the PS7 as is, with the updates to the new language. Okay, so do we think we have everything?
I think there might be one more. This is Stephen, sorry. I think Councilmember Jenkins, you had wanted to revisit or at least clarify who makes the call on a council member needing to go over to remote meetings for special circumstances? Or is everyone okay with that being the meeting chair?
It seems like we got some kind of a consensus. Everybody's nodding their head in the same direction. So I think we got that resolved, that the mayor or the chair of the meeting will be the person that will decide that. Is there anybody heard differently? I think we're all on board with that.
Okay. And then was everyone on board with changing the date that materials needed to be submitted to the clerk to Monday?
That's where I got into the discussion about getting the packet a week earlier. Because we got the packet a week earlier, you wouldn't have to be trying to jam it out there on Monday morning, before a meeting. You would have time. You could do it Friday. You could even do it Thursday, and give everybody a chance to see what the comments were. You have a lot more leeway in your schedule than you have with that. And that's why I wanted to precipitate that discussion so we could get through that, because that very much affects this other discussion you just brought up about Monday or Friday or whatever. So with one not being resolved, it kind of makes it hard to resolve the other.
Well, I would throw out maybe we leave it at Friday as is, and when we revisit the packet day, we could revisit that day. And that keeps it in.
For the record.
I could live with that for now.
Councilmember Kimling.
Yeah, I was just going to say my preference would have been to move the day of the packet, but since I don't think there's enough support on the council, I still think moving this to Monday would be an improvement that we could make currently right now.
We could find out if there's support on the council. We could make a motion as to whether we want to move the packets.
I don't know, I mean, is that so much of something, I mean, we can't make a motion for something that's physically impossible, logistically impossible. I mean, we can say that's our wishes and we can tell them that's what we want to do, but we make a motion and pass it. I don't know that it's possible. Unless we're going to look at moving the planning commission meetings and stuff, and I don't know that the planning commission would look strongly upon that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just going to have to look at, we can look at kind of our overall schedule in terms of, I know they're having some conversations about moving planning commission meetings potentially, so there's some potential there that could impact this. So I just be a little premature to say that, but just if we go to that deadline, I think to Councilman Larson-Bedell pointed out, then these things would be pushed. So say something was on planning and there was an item that then falls to the council meeting that we're able to turn that around. So Monday night planning commission on the 16th, we start, finalizing the packet on Tuesday to get it out on Wednesday. Keep in mind that instead of that being on August 23rd, it would be September 13th. So if that packet deadline and the packet goes out on Monday, August 16th, that would not go to council. Instead of it going on August 23rd, it would be going on September 13th under the proposed kind of agenda deadline. So depending on that item, may not be an issue, may not be a concern. To some it may be. Again, it's just a greater delay on their end. And usually with those items coming out of planning, again, they've had it, that packet's been out too, so.
Just the last comment to Steve's comment about leaving it on Friday. Well, we may never address this other issue, okay, about changing the delivery of the packet. So if that's the case, if we're going to go on record and put something in the books, I'd rather put the Monday in the books and give the people the most time possible. And then if we can come back and change the packet dates, then we can relook at the deadline for getting your information into the city staff. So I'd be endorsing the Monday concept.
And I believe Councilmember Kimley and I can tell you that PS7 has changed on a pretty regular basis. So we see what works and keep adjusting. Councilmember Larson-Bedell.
May I move to change the timing to noon on Monday for public written comments and public materials?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Okay. Okay, this is Steven. Sorry, I was muted. I'm going to start from the top of this and work my way down. Okay, so we're moving the date for written testimony and other materials related to an agenda item to be due by noon on the day of the meeting. We are changing back to, or continuing with 5 minutes for public comments. We are going to set parameters to limit public comments after 12 people have signed up for an item.
Mayor, just one, I just want to make sure it's a defining moment that when people sign up, there is an opportunity for them to say what they're going to speak to, not merely that just 12 people signed up.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll wordsmith the business from the floor section to say that it's preferred or strongly encouraged for people to sign up in advance because it will enhance their ability to present information to the governing body, but it's not required. If they want to make a PowerPoint presentation or have any handouts, they need to get that to the city clerk. It says by noon on the day of the meeting. And then we'll add a sentence to say that all public comments will follow the rules stated in Section 2G 1 through 3, A through D, 4 through 5, which is the 3-minute or the 5-minute rule, and kind of link those two together so you don't have conflicting time limits and rules about, you know, the mayor or chair being able to limit comments after 12 people sign up. And then allowing the meeting chair to authorize members to participate in more than 2 meetings remotely if they have emergency circumstances that they're dealing with. I think that was it.
And I was just thinking, as you just said, that if you don't want to leave it to just one person to make that determination, it could be the mayor and council president. So you have to have 2 yeses to approve anything additional over 2 meetings. It's up to you guys. I'm just throwing that out. Councilmember Nappen.
I think we've discussed it long enough. I'm comfortable with you making the decision.
Councilmember Kenley.
Yeah, and so this wasn't in Stephen's list. Is anyone else wanting to change the personal and slanderous remarks section, or am I the only one?
So I believe City Attorney Rainey addressed that's all specific language that came from previous court cases that they won.
Right. So I'm not saying that it's not legally valid. I'm saying I don't like what's in there, and I don't feel like some of those things truly constitute a disruptive act. So if no one else agrees with me, that's fine. But I was just curious.
Well, I believe that the one you cited specifically, where speaking too long or something like that one, I'd like to see that removed. That doesn't even make sense. I mean, there's already all the limitations on time and all that kind of stuff. So why are we even putting that part in there? That just gets kind of confusing.
Councilmember Zimmerman.
You know, on this whole thing about slander and whatnot, it wasn't that long ago that our council got a little bit frustrated with comments that came out of one of our volunteer committee sessions about things that were said that they perceived to be slanderous. So I think we got to be consistent across the board. We had this conversation before, and it was pretty emphatic that we were going to hold our volunteers in our committees to a higher standard. So I think keeping this language in there is consistent with what we talked about with that in the past.
Councilmember Thomas?
In this, I'm not sure that it's appropriate to, or it may be appropriate, but it's not necessary to include violation per the municipal code, You know, it just seems almost intimidating from my perspective. And that is something that I would like to see taken away from the language.
I can see that. The other side that I see, though, is the transparency in it, that, you know, if someone does consider to continue to yell from the audience or something like that, they need to know that there are punitive consequences to doing so. So I see your side, but I also think that it's transparent and that if I continue to do this, this is what I'm possibly going to, is it a citation charge? I don't know what you call that, but I think it's letting them know ahead of time so they have advanced knowledge that, I don't know, I see both sides of that.
Wouldn't they just be removed from the meeting if they didn't temper themselves?
Well, and in the instance, there was the individual that refused to be removed from the meeting and said, if you want to remove me, the police are going to have to remove me. And because citation that he didn't know was an issue. So having that in there, I think then they know ahead of time. Well, okay. Anything else?
Yeah.
Oh, Councilmember Jenkins.
Yeah, we still didn't get down to nitty gritty on the comment that was and the concern that Councilmember Kemling has about that one little piece in there. it actually seems kind of confusing and stuff. I would like to see that taken out as well. Could you read that one comment there?
Under the list of disruptive behaviors, it lists untimely or repetitive talking.
So to me, I mean, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other, but when I hear that, to me, untimely is if they're commenting on a different agenda item than what the one that we're talking about is what I would consider untimely. And repetitive, it kind of, I would think, would give the chair the ability that if they do say, okay, we've heard this, do you have a new point to make? But that's what I think of when I hear that.
Well, and I agree 100% with that. I guess, to me, this is listed as a disruptive behavior right after we're telling people that it's a Class A violation. And so, yeah, I don't want them repeating stuff, or I don't want them talking about an item that's not there. I just don't know if that is a violation of our municipal code or should be listed as one.
That's a good point. Is there kind of a way to separate that? How would you do that?
We can, and I think the untimely and repetitive talking may have also been in cases where you maybe have members of the public who are having a side conversation during a meeting, not necessarily commenting on an item on the agenda, but they're sort of disrupting a meeting because they're sitting here talking to one another and interrupting, and maybe unintentionally interrupting someone. But just in those cases, you know, I think that was more of what that phrase is related to than someone getting up and speaking on an item and saying just like same thing over and over and over.
So then that would fall under a citation if they're...
If they're in the audience, they're not a speaker. For some reason, I thought this was going to apply to whoever's up speaking. And so if it's the audience, yeah, the audience shouldn't be making untimely or even repetitive marks from the...
Perhaps you could clarify that by putting audience members that, you know, and just preface that or just wordsmith it a little bit.
And that was Councilmember Jenkins. Okay. So now that we have all the individual votes, do we just vote on the rest of the policy as a whole, or did we already vote on everything individually?
There were a few things that you didn't vote on individually, so I would, but everything that you did vote on passed unanimously.
Okay, so a motion, Councilmember Kimling?
Motion to change the language on page 5, point number 5 for personal and slanderous remarks to specify that untimely and repetitive comments is referring to from the audience.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Now a motion for the rest of the policy.
Move to adopt the changes to policy 7 as indicated from the straw votes of the council.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 1 is to consider ordinance number 3386, approving text amendments to Shawnee Municipal Code Title 17, zoning for animal-related uses. The Planning Commission recommended 9-0 that the governing body approve the text amendments. The ordinance is required. Stephanie Malmborg, Deputy Community Development Director, will make a brief presentation. Welcome, Stephanie.
Good evening, Stephanie Malmborg, Deputy Community Development Director in the Community Development Department. I'm going to go over this briefly, but please be advised that the Planning Commission has thoroughly vetted this text amendment. If you could go to the next slide. Thank you. So an overview of the Planning Commission staff report on the screen you'll see here. The staff report went over lots of different information regarding this particular project. And just for some quick background, this particular text amendment spurred from a number of different things. We had lots of inquiries for business owners that wanted to have dog daycares in certain areas of town. We had some people ask about doing Bar-K type concepts, which for those of you that may have not been to Bar-K in Kansas City, it's like a bar that allows your dog to come play at a dog park as well and have a dog menu, all those types of fun things. So as you can imagine, our code doesn't necessarily anticipate how to treat those types of uses. So we do want to make sure to update some things related to animal type uses as far as zoning goes. And there are some other amendments to the animal title of the Shawnee Municipal Code that you'll see later tonight. So as part of the review for Planning Commission, we looked at our existing code regulations and how we might need to adjust those to meet some of these new standards that we'd like to set. We compared code regulations in our peer communities. We looked at state of Kansas regulations for how these types of businesses are licensed and regulated by the state. We provided a summary of the businesses that we already have in town that have licenses from the state. And we looked at proposed text amendments that staff drafted based on input from not only the Planning Commission, other staff members, what we saw in other communities, and then also some of the prospective business owners and current business owners in town that had similar types of businesses. Next slide. There are several definitions proposed. Some of these are some tweaking of existing definitions and some are completely new. These definitions are for animal boarding, animal breeding, animal-centric restaurant and bar, which is the term we came up for, something like a bar-K type concept. On that note, keep in mind, animal would also cover a cat cafe. We've also heard of those as well. Those would be fun. Animal daycare, large and small animal, which are definitions we're essentially copying from Title VI for consistency. Animal shelter, which as you recall, recently we had all kinds of homeless shelter regulations, but we did not cover animal sheltering, so we are covering that here. And then a couple definitions related to outdoor areas. So we have outdoor animal activity area, outdoor animal kennel, outdoor animal run. Those are, believe it or not, all different things and are regulated a little bit differently in the proposed draft. An animal activity area is kind of your fenced-in doggy play area type thing that you may think of. A kennel is more of a housing structure for like an overnight sleeping arrangement. And an animal run is more like a small enclosure meant for a dog to go out and do their business on kind of like a peat gravel type surface. We also define pet store and veterinary services. And in the existing code, we called out both veterinary services and animal hospitals, so we consolidated that down to one definition. I know this is very small on the screen here, but you can see in your packet, these are some of the proposed changes. And just to summarize what's on the screen here, you can see a few words in green text and a few in strike-through red. A lot of this on your screen is just for consistency purposes here. We changed a couple words to make sure that it was consistent with Title VI in these instances and removed a couple different dog kennel related regulations from a few sections of the code so that we can kind of consolidate things and have less overlap of where those kennel related regulations fall within Title 17. The table of uses has several changes to consolidate and rename some of those animal type uses, and all of these relate to those definitions that we just went over. So in our different zoning districts, there's going to be a little bit different regulation for each of those uses and where they can go. The one that you see on the screen now is our residential zoning district table, and here the most substantial changes really are just the addition of an animal-centric type bar use, a restaurant use requiring a special use permit in the ag zoning district. So that's a completely new use to the table. Animal shelters also is in this table, and that is a permitted use. And you can see those comments sort of on that right column that pertains to some additional regulations and special conditions. A lot of those reference a new section that has some miscellaneous regulations for how the outdoor spaces are treated. Next slide. This is our second use table, and this is the commercial and industrial use table and the different land uses that are allowed in those zoning districts. You can see here in red, we crossed out things like animal daycare and kind of reconsolidated that into animal daycare for small animals, made sure that we clarified which zoning districts it could go into and added that additional new section and those regulations. We also kind of rephrased kenneling and bordering and breeding and changed it to animal boarding. And a notable change in this particular table is any animal-related uses that we do allow in some capacity in our industrial district, would be allowed by special use permit only. And that was one of our main topics from one of our existing business owners, was the ability to allow boarding in the PI zoning district. Currently, we do not allow any boarding in PI by either permitted use or special use. And so this would be a change. In order to make it consistent, we wanted to make sure that any animal-related use allowed in PI is a special use. So it will be reviewed by both the Planning Commission and the City Council. There is an existing business owner that may be interested in potentially obtaining a special use permit for allowing boarding within their facility. And, oh, sorry, if you could go back one more. Thank you. And just wanted to make a note here, we did consolidate some of those different categories and clarified that small animals would be what we were talking about with land uses for animal shelters, animal grooming, veterinary services, those types of things. So again, differentiating a little bit with commercial zoning districts, making sure someone doesn't bring their cow to the bar or something. You never know these days. But so that summarizes this particular table. If you have any questions about the proposed uses, feel free to let me know. And I think on our next slide is our last one. And I know that's a lot on here too. This is the new animal-related use conditions. And this is a new section that outlines exactly how those outdoor activity areas would be treated, as well as sound be treated for our animal-related uses. And to summarize what's said here, each type of outdoor space, which is the outdoor activity areas, the kennels, and the runs, is regulated a little bit differently. There are setback requirements. There are use definitions, also timing requirements for when those areas are able to be used during the day. And it talks about the approval methods. For approval of these types of outdoor areas, staff is able to approve them on an existing property. If someone's just looking to add a space that's relatively small for, say, like a vet clinic wants to add a little area that's fenced in that they can walk the dogs in, that's something that we're proposing to look at on an administrative level. And if it's a new development, such as pet suites, that would be an outdoor area that the Planning Commission would review as part of the site plan process. And lastly, when we talk about sound, there are some restrictions for sound, and that would have to go along with the outdoor areas. And the hours of operation are generally business daylight hours. I believe it says 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And if it causes a nuisance, there could be sound mitigation required. So that's a very broad overview of a lot of information that we dove very deep into several times at Planning Commission. But overall, I think the collaboration between not only different staff members, making sure this is consistent with code, Planning Commission discussion with business owners and the public, I think this is a great draft document that meets a lot of needs for the community and addresses a lot of issues that we had trying to find clarification with the code. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the council? Councilmember Larson-Bonnell?
First of all, I want to thank you and your team for your work on this. I know it was a lot of work, and just to put this into context, the animal and pet industry in the United States is billions of dollars worth of revenue every year, and we found out that our own zoning and land use regulations were making it so that businesses that wanted to be very innovative were not able to locate in Shawnee, and that was really unfortunate. So just to give some examples of some of the things that this is going to allow, animal health related things that are not necessarily veterinary, hydrotherapy, something that a Ledexa place has, physical therapy, acupuncture, chiropractic, dental, all of these things are actually things that people want for their pets as standalone options. If there's a business that can make money doing that, I'm more than happy to have them in Shawnee. There are a couple of comments that I had about how all of this shook out. One of them, it's a very persnickety thing, and I don't know whether just this piece can be sent back to the Planning Commission for consideration or if it's just something that we kind of table for a future discussion. But with the town square zoning, we allowed a daycare, but we don't allow boarding. and I tried to bring this to your attention prior to the Planning Commission meeting. The problem with that separation, which in some ways I can understand how it makes logical sense, but when you allow daycare, there is always the possibility that you are going to have to board the animals if their owner doesn't come to pick them up. So we use a doggy daycare in Ward 4, actually, and they just had a situation the other day that they had to board a dog because they got a call at 5:55 saying, I'm heading to the hospital right now to be admitted. I can't come get my dog. I need you to board it. So I would like that to be a permitted use under Town Square, even if it is just a special use permit. But I want this. It's more important that this move forward as a package than that little tiny issue gets addressed. And then the only other comment that I had was us opening up to our ag districts a little bit, at least with a special use permit, to have animal-centric bars and things like that, actually can also open up potentially, or at least opens up the conversation for things like wineries. Right now, because we're not permitted to have any of this kind of commercial activity in an ag zone, anybody that wanted to have a vineyard and a winery would be really limited in being able to do that anywhere in the city limits. So that's sort of like the natural next step of something that we can be looking at that's related to this. Anyway, that's all my comments. I really appreciate all of your hard work.
We did have a winery in Shawnee. Am I imagining things out west? No?
We had a business at one time that I believe was wanting to become a winery.
This is Stephanie Momberg. Just to clarify, we did do a liquor-related text amendment a couple years ago that does actually allow wineries in the ag district. So the animal-centric, that addresses that concern at least, but the animal-centric bar and restaurant was considered an ag because of that very thing, because we've looked at whether those large expanses of land, which are great for dog parks, would be compatible with some sort of beverage-related business.
My apologies. I must have misunderstood something in the Planning Commission meeting.
Gotcha.
Yes, I thought we had a place looking at that out west. Okay, but it never happened. Okay. Any other questions or comments from the council? Anybody from the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda, staff items. Item number 1 is consider ordinance number 3387, amending Title 6 of the Shawnee Municipal Code related to animals. Staff is proposing minor revisions to various chapters within Title 6 related to animals for consistency with Title 17 related to zoning and land use. Staff is also seeking directions on possible changes to the special animal permit process. Stephen Powell, Deputy City Manager, will make a very brief presentation.
I have one slide. Pretty much all the changes in that proposed ordinance are required because of the ordinance you all just passed. But from time to time, when we make tweaks to the municipal code, we like to throw ideas out to you all and let you make some decisions. We don't update Title VI very often, so one of the ideas that we had been talking about for a couple of years is changing our special animal permit process for dogs and cats. Currently, if you have more than 2 dogs or more than 2 cats, you have to get a special animal permit. And one of the ideas that kind of floated up was to streamline that process a little bit more so that you could have up to 4 dogs and or cats in any combination and have the permit. This would eliminate about 9 special animal permits that we currently issue for someone who may have 3 dogs or 3 cats. We talked with one of our community service officers that works closely with this permit process, and he didn't have any issues with it. We reached out to a couple of our other cities, and it's a mixed bag. Most of them do what we do now, but there were about 2 of them in Johnson County that have switched to this model. So we don't really have any recommendation, but because we're getting ready to start the animal permit renewal process, we thought we would ask you all your thoughts and get some feedback and see if it's something you all wanted to move forward with.
Councilmember Kemley.
Yeah, I like that proposed change, 4 total, whether it be cats or dogs or a mix. I would be in favor of that.
Councilmember Chaffee.
I agree. I like the 4 total. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Constance?
I agree. 4 total makes sense. Thank you.
Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 2 is consider approving final plans, authorizing staff to bid the 2021 Stormwater Pipe Repair West Project number 3529. Final plans on this project are complete. Recommended action is to approve final plans and authorize staff to bid the project. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience want to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 3 is consider change order number 1, contract number 2021-054 from Infrastructure Solutions LLC for the 2021 Stormwater Pipe Repair East Project number 3530. June 21st, 21, governing body approved the contract. Change order number 1 represents an increase of $121,774 for the emergency repair of a sinkhole that is developed at ACAF and Blackfish Parkway. Recommended action is to approve the change order. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay. Motion passes. Item number 4 is consider ordinance number 3388, amending Shawnee Municipal Code, Chapter 1520, International Property Maintenance Code related to electrical facilities. This amendment would require all occupied buildings to be connected and approved source of power as determined by the codes enforcement supervisor or building official. Recommended actions consider passing ordinance number 3388. Does anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is miscellaneous items. Item number 1 is to ratify semi-monthly claims for August 23rd, 2021 in the amount of $2,360,290.37. Anyone on the council have any questions? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second. Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Miscellaneous council items. Does anyone on council have an item they would like to discuss? Councilmember Chafee, then Councilmember Larson-Bonnell.
I just wanted to remind the public that this Wednesday is a public open house for our comprehensive plan. It's a come and go event at the Civic Center from 6 to 8. So I would encourage everybody to stop by, take a look at where we're at in the process. It's just another opportunity to give your input on our comp plan. So 6 to 8 Wednesday at the Civic Center. Thank you.
Councilmember Larson-Bonnell.
Yes, I have 2 items this evening. First of all, I've received a lot of very positive public feedback about our ordinance change allowing golf carts. I think that we are going through some growing pains, though, and one of our residents did report that we do still have problems with golf carts on trails in parks. I think that our working theory before was that we didn't need to post any signs or anything about golf carts because they weren't legal. But now that they are legal, I think it's important for us to have signage along the trails that says that golf carts are not permitted on the trails. So that was item number 1. If staff can, okay.
I would say we also have a couple new bicycles for our officers, too, that can go ride the trails.
Oh.
Look for violators.
All right.
No, I haven't seen Officer Mo on the bike, but we do have bicycle officers now. We have bicycles.
And if we had an easy infographic that kind of explained to people what our new where golf carts are allowed and where they're not allowed and kind of our rules around it, I would love to be able to distribute that to our community members. So that's with the golf cart piece. The second thing is I've been doing a lot of door knocking and I've been getting a handful of emails from the public as well. And there is a very, very strong discontent right now with some things that are going on with solid waste management in the city of Shawnee. And they are things that are being done by private companies. In this case, a lot of the ire is towards waste management. However, I have had a handful of constituents ask whether the city can pass an ordinance that requires weekly recycling pickup. Now, I will note, I did do a little bit of research on this. First, I confirmed that we don't have an ordinance like that. Second, I confirmed that Lenexa did have an ordinance like that, as well as some other cities, and Lenexa changed theirs earlier this year at the behest of waste management. I am hearing enough feedback at this point that I do wonder if it's time for us to take a closer look as a council at what our solid waste management guidelines say or what our ordinances say and what they don't say, and whether it's time for any revisions. I am separating this from the tidy town conversation, by the way. I think that people, at least those that I talk to, they're just kind of like meh to the tidy town changes, but they are really mad about what's going on individually with them with waste management. So I was wondering if there'd be support from the council to taking a look at those solid waste management ordinances, seeing what's there, seeing what's not there, and seeing if we can make any changes.
I'm in support of that.
Councilmember Thomas?
I would be in support. Because they only do theirs, what, twice a month or something, every other week, or?
It's a new thing. It's a new thing that it's every other week. So
Every other week
I'd be supportive of looking at it.
That was Councilmember Knappen. And then Councilmember Jenkins, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'd be willing to look at it. There is quite a bit of activity going on with the citizens about this, and a huge portion of it is they're not picking up the yard waste like they used to.
Yeah.
And I believe we all got a card from Waste Management on that saying, here's our problem, we don't have enough drivers and stuff, and it's not like a personal problem kind of, but anyway, they got a contract with people to do this stuff, so they need to solve their problem, obviously. But that seems to be the bulk of it, at least. I think the fact that people's yard waste, they put it out there 2, 3, 4 times, is not getting picked up, and they're getting very, very frustrated about it.
So I guess just for some clarification purposes, is there anything specific you want us to look at? And then again, we start to head down a path that quite honestly, I think this council has maybe heard a number of years ago, and there's some pretty strong opinions on, but we start to head down a path of potentially contracting and not going to basically, you're able to choose your own hauler. So again, we can put in certain kind of benchmarks, I guess, and certain requirements for performance. But again, we start to head more towards a contract situation. So just, and if that's the direction that the council would like us to look at, we can present those options. But I want to, in order for us to kind of be prepared for that presentation, if there are certain parameters you want us to look at or certain parameters you want us to stay away from.
Before I recognize Councilmember Larson-Manel, so Councilmember Kimling was on the council at the time. I mean, there were over 5,000 signatures of folks not wanting to go with a single hauler. They want their choice in hauler. It was one of the loudest, longest meetings we ever had. People felt very strongly about it. And additionally, to my point, when I've heard that, I recommend my hauler to them because they haven't had any issues. So that gives them, if they can't provide the service that resident is wanting them to provide, then they should try the hauler I'm using or one of the other haulers we allow in the city that is able to keep up with demand and workload versus maybe going the ordinance route. It's about the free market. But Councilmember Larson-Manel and then Councilmember Jenkins.
So whenever a resident asks me, why doesn't the city provide trash, I tell them no. Really, and I explain that we have been down this path and that is not an option. What I'm looking for are minimum standards that I believe that we are well within our rights to set. And we have set them. We already have frequencies of various types of pickups. What the community that I'm talking to is demanding are the frequency of the yard waste pickup. You're absolutely right about that. And the frequency of the recycling pickup. I believe we've been silent on both of those issues. I am not asking to limit the choice of our residents for the number of haulers, but I do think if you're going to do business in the city of Shawnee, that it's reasonable for us to set these expectations. But this is also why I wanted to have a discussion. This is why I want it to come to committee or whatever venue would be appropriate so that we can understand the ramifications of making these kind of changes.
And to Councilmember Larson-Manel's point too, when we are looking at it, I'd also want to look at even possibly service after a storm on this side of the city, even though the storm wasn't this big this weekend. It looked like a zone, branches down in the streets everywhere. You were trying to drive around. Fortunately, like Quivira and 75th and Neiman, the main streets don't have the trees to have the branches on them. It was all the residential streets. And Dad, bless his heart, he's out helping all of his surrounding neighbors get the branches up and out. But we have a lot of issues with trees and streets in this area. So with the yard waste part, we have a lot of tree debris, and if they're not going to pick it up, that's an issue on this side of town because we have a lot of it after this weekend. Councilmember Jenkins?
Turn on my mic here. I agree with what Lisa's saying as far as having some sort of basic standards for the city. If you're going to be a trash hauler in Shawnee, here's some just basic things that you're going to be expected to do as a minimum. And that leaves it wide open for any of the haulers to do more or whatever and provide additional services or make themselves look better in order to get the contract instead of somebody else. So, but at least a set of basic, you got to be able to do this much. You got to be able to pick up once a week, and you got to recycle once a week, or whether we decide to make it 2 times a week. We're all going to discuss that when we bring it before council committee. But I can understand the angst and the frustration on the part of the people because services has gone down pretty dramatically in the last year or so, and the price is going up. So that's always a bad combination if you're wanting to have people getting upset. And I think that's the crux of it right there. The people are getting less service for more money, and they're pushing back, and they're becoming pretty vocal.
And I think part of the issue is kind of like what all of our businesses are struggling with right now is finding help. Nobody, they can't find anybody to, So that's a big part of the issue. It may not necessarily be that they don't want to, they just physically can't. They can't get enough people in the door because I know I'm hearing a lot of that from our restaurants and stuff. They can't get people, they can't get help. Councilmember Thomas?
I just know that from Black Swan area, when Waste Management delivered these very large recycle bins that they have in their setting, they have pretty small garages or even covered areas, and they couldn't even get them in their garage. And so now they're not by their own choosing, but they have to keep this thing outside. And then you get raccoons and all this kind of stuff. So it has been a problem. And I know folks over in that area contacted me, this huge thing, arrived at our house and they only come once every other week. And it is a challenge. I would like to discuss it.
They can't not pick up yard waste when we have so much debris after the storm. Any other miscellaneous council items?
I just have something that we've talked about it briefly before, and that is about some type of sidewalk or some type of path between Shawnee Mission Parkway and 435 on Midland. And in reading some of the, I know there's a new subdivision going in on Midland, and I think it's like 70 some odd houses or something. But when you already hear about, people that ride bikes, people that walk, people, on the occasional horse that you see on, Midland Drive, how can we expedite getting something there for those, just to be safe? It's not even, it's just a road. It's not really well marked. It has no gutters and things such as that. Just looking at timing that perhaps could bring that to the forefront. I know I had suggested a temporary thing, and I caught quite a bit of flack of why would you waste, taxpayer money for that? But we've already lost a citizen who was walking on that street because he was hit. So what else can we do? What timing can we get this thing in place earlier?
Any other miscellaneous?
Just to follow up on that, I completely agree, but I thought we had agreed that staff was going to look into that and come back to us at some point. Is that going to happen sometime in the next couple months?
I'm not sure on the exact timing. It comes from Thomas's point, but it is something that we're looking into in terms of are there some intermediate options? We've got the Green Street concept again that may factor into that, but is there kind of a trail or a connection that we can make that a safer route between those two points?
Am I correct in that there is a rather large subdivision that's coming down the pike for that, and that's what even spawned my question of where are we with that, especially if there's 70 some odd homes, single family homes. I anticipate each of them will be at least a 2-car garage, so that's potentially 140 cars. And I'm just concerned that it's increasing, and that's pretty significant.
Correct. We do have a project that is going through rezoning that'll be coming to the council on that property.
Any other miscellaneous council items? Okay, next item on the agenda is business from the floor. Anyone have business from the floor? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Ray Ehrlichman, 7510 Garnett Street. In the past couple of weeks, I've sent 2 emails addressed to the city manager and the mayor with carbon copies to the council, the governing body. As of today, I still have not received a reply. And it was a very simple question that I was asking. It wasn't detailed, didn't require years and years of research. It was with this new procedure that you've adopted where the council committee meets after the city council. What do you tell a person who doesn't want to attend the council meeting but wants to attend or comment at the committee meeting? What are they supposed to do? And specifically, I even brought it up myself where 2 weeks ago I would have liked to discuss this policy statement 7 at the committee meeting, but I didn't know how long I was going to be sitting around council chambers. Tonight, anybody that wants to address the committee or listen to what the committee has to say would have had to sit here for 2 hours and 20 minutes. So that's the question. This is not necessarily a new item. I sent you 2 emails. I think you've had time to look at them. What do you tell these people? If they don't want to attend the council meeting, they want to attend the committee meeting, or they have comments for the committee meeting, is it going to be a 15-minute council meeting? We've seen those. Is it going to be a 6-hour council meeting? We've seen those too. So what do you want to tell these people? We talk about open government. We talk about transparency. We talk about caring about the people. That's not caring about the people. I've got a simple solution, though. I'm not just standing up here complaining about it. I've got a simple solution. I think the city council has to go back to separate nights for the council meeting and for the committee meeting. That makes it a lot easier. That's number one. And number two, if it conflicts with another committee or the planning commission or somebody, hey, maybe make them change their nights. But to run these meetings back to back, and again, somebody was sitting here wanting to address the committee, they'd have to be sitting here for 2 hours and 20 minutes. That's not right. That's not caring about the people. And I'm still waiting for an answer from the mayor and from the city manager. What are you going to tell somebody when they ask you that question? Gee, when should I show up at City Hall for the committee meeting?
Thank you. Any other business from the floor? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn. I'd like to remind the public that the council committee meeting will begin in about 10 minutes after the conclusion of the city council meeting. If there are no other items, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Second.
Motion